Now from river transport to road transport, and in the 1950s and 60s, British cars were as popular in Australia as they were in British colonies like India, Hong Kong and Singapore. An exhibition at the National Motor Museum in Birdwood, South Australia, celebrates the best of the post-war British cars.
When I was a kid, my dad used to take me to car museums in England, and we always used to look at these rows of English cars. So I was surprised when I came to Australia and found that for most people, post-war motoring in Australia is about Holden or Ford, or Holden and Chrysler. So when I came to set up my first exhibition at the National Motor Museum here in Birdwood in South Australia, I decided to look at the experience of British post-war motoring in Australia, and was surprised to find that until the late 1950s, British cars were the best-selling cars. Austin, Morris, BMC, they outsold Holdens right up until the late 1950s when Holden took over. And so I really wanted to look at why that was and how that affected the experience of motoring in Australia in the 40s and 50s. So I looked at the sorts of cars that people were buying, and they seemed to fall into four categories. And so I designed the exhibition around four categories, and of course the one thing that everybody knows about British motoring is the Rolls Royce. So I had to have a Rolls Royce, and we had one in our collection. It's the Governor General's Rolls Royce, and a lot of royalty have travelled in it over the years, and I felt that I'd like it in the exhibition. But I didn't want this black monolith in the middle of my exhibition. I wanted something that was a little more engaging. So I felt that one of the things that you can't do in car museums is get into the cars or see into the cars very often. So we took the doors off. I know that a lot of our female visitors really like to look inside the car and see the accommodations in the back where Princess Di would have sat, and in the front where a very small driver would have sat to drive, because there's not much room in the front. The other areas I wanted to look at were mini cars, small cars, like the Morris Minor, like the Mini itself that British were famous for. And so I had a little area that looks at those small British cars. In the 1940s and 50s, British sports cars were considered amongst the best in the world, so I had to do something on sports cars, and I knew that I wanted something that was a typical classic British sports car, an upright radiator, preferably green. And again, as a kid, I'd gone to trials and seen HRG racers racing, and I wondered whether I could get an HRG, and